Well, why don't we, should we get started? It's a little after the hour.
Sure.
Do it.
Great. Welcome, everyone. We have some familiar faces, some new faces, which is wonderful. And we are, hosting these sessions really as an open forum for all of us, including ourselves here at In Rhythm, to connect and empathize and connect in community during this extraordinary times and how we're responding to crisis and the COVID crisis. So we'll be hosting these actually once a week. And last week we really just held an open conversation, which we still want to do today, as well as go into talking about some of the principles that we think of in regenerative organizations and think about what our responses, what our different responses can be from a traditional response to a crisis like this. We have some folks who've just joined us from our webinar. Thank you. And so we'll be continuing on from that. But let's just start with, would love to have everyone just, give a little introduction, who they are, what's meaningful for you to share with everyone today, and maybe where you're calling from, because it's always exciting to know your context.
Hi, everyone. Is it okay if I start?
Yes, great. I was going to say I was going to call on someone, but then once you're done, why don't you call on someone so
okay, cool.
we know who to talk. So great. Thank you. Go, Christine.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine. I'm from Community Resource Exchange. That's a nonprofit capacity building organization based out in New York City. I'm currently located in Queens, New York, in the Rockaways near the beach, which is awesome. My colleague Patty, who's actually right over there, she introduced me to En Rhythm, and I thought what I saw on the website was really cool, and I wanted to just get some more information about the concept of regenerative organization, and I love that it's based on nature, and so I'm here to learn.
Great, thank you.
And I guess I'll pass it to Trey.
Thank you. So I'm glad to be here. Sorry, get my headspace just jumped off of a webinar and that I was presenting on, and so I'm just glad to be here. So glad to be present with you guys. Lots of stuff going on in the world and in our lives, and it's so easy to just get sucked into a lot of work, and I just appreciate just being here right now. So thank you. And I'll pass the baton to, let's see, Adam.
Hi, everybody. I was here last week. It was really great. And as Trey says, it's important to change the pace, especially the pace being what it is these days. And I'm the Director of Biodiversity for Livable Climate. We're in East Cambridge, Massachusetts, and educate on many, many things, regenerative and restorative, and we know how to heal the world. It's just that it's hard to get people to listen up, but we're ready to go, as all of you are, I know. And I'll pick Patty.
Okay, thanks for that, Adam. Hi, everyone. My name is Patty Denise, or my friends call me Issa. And I am out in Brooklyn, and I've been following In Rhythm for a minute. I think I have an environmental background, and I'm an organizational health consultant. And so it's right at that intersection, right, of like, how do we think about people these are organisms, right? And so I think so many times within organizations, we kind of like fail to recognize that and are kind of like, for better or worse, really just in these structures that don't seem to serve our best potential and aren't really serving the individuals that are in these structures. So in any case, I think this moment is really elevating. It's like a breaking point, right? In some of the ways that these structures don't serve us. And as an organizational health consultant, I think it's something I'm thinking about all the time, because this is not, this moment, this COVID moment is a public health crisis. So it's really calling us to look at what our organisms need, both individually, environmentally, organizationally. We can't, it's like a reckoning, right? So how do I bring that lens through the kind of like crisis relief and response work that so many people have no other option but to try to move through? And that's why I'm here. And maybe Jen?
Hi, thanks, Patty. Gosh, I just feel like what you and Christine, yeah, I really don't want to talk about too much on my end. I just want to know about you two, like how you guys are doing in the thick of it, and and Northeast and Adam, and Trey and I are in Arkansas, and we still have, can thankfully go outside and take nice walks in the woods, and and have that gosh, I've never thought of it as being a luxury before, and it is, and so I'm just my heart goes out to what you guys and our other friends that are in that area too. So, but personally, just roller coaster ride for me, and but thankfully I have strong family and friends that are, really set this course straight, and really good things to think about. And Jeff he has such an amazing presence, and he just wrote an article, and I'm not sure if you wanted to talk about that, but too late. It is just released on this moment in time with grief and regeneration, and so he just has some wise words that he has written in an article. So yeah, so with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Jeff.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I'm Jeff. I'm with the In Rhythm team, and I'm here in Western Massachusetts. Lucky to be also close to woods and trails, and also feeling very fortunate. I moved back here a year ago to be close to my aging parents. I grew up in this town, and they're 88 and 87, and I'm just so thankful that I'm here and can support them and get groceries for them. And so thank you for the kind words, Jen. And yeah, we will, if anyone's interested, check out our blog, and we'll actually be diving into that a little bit more next week. So we're kind of in a cadence of just sort of releasing some thoughts and then having these open conversations. Patty, amazing to hear your background. Would love to connect more on that. Christy, those of you who are just coming to In Rhythm for the first time, encourage you to check out one of our webinars, check out some of our resources. But this space is really about us all holding space for each other. So we'll talk a little bit about us as an organization, but it's more just about what we can all provide for each other in a peer community. So I will pass it to Robert.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert. I'm calling in from Kenya. And I think the In Rhythm guys know I've been kind of following their work for maybe about a year now, I guess. And I'm just a person who's very curious, about the idea of living systems, the regenerative paradigm, and like the whole idea of how things like mindfulness really change the way we perceive the systems within which we operate. So That's how I find myself here this evening, and just, keen to participate in the conversation that we're gonna have tonight, at least tonight for me, daytime for most of you. So super glad to be here with each one of you. Thanks.
Okay, I think that leaves me. I'll jump in. So my name's Alex, for those of you who I don't know yet. I'm also with the In Rhythm team, and I'm based in Minneapolis and Minnesota. But, just mindful, my whole family's in Montreal, and that's kind of becoming a hot spot in Canada right now. So I feel a little bit mindful of that today. And just, coming off this webinar that we were just on with Trey and the team and some of you actually, on monitoring organizational health, and just really thinking a lot about health right now. I mean, it's so prevalent, and it's so both, this collective health emergency that we're having, but also, it's bringing to light the importance of our resiliency, both individually and collectively, because we're put in this really challenging situation where we're having to, stay home and change our own rhythms. And that's kind of, challenging. And I don't know. Yeah. So that's what I'm kind of mindful of, and just grateful for this space. I think, as Trey said, I think it's easy to dive into work, but I really appreciate connecting with all of you. And yeah, I'm really grateful for that today. So glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here just as a way to guide our conversation. No. So everyone see our
Pop-ups.
inside laughing there around the pop-up. But if you all didn't have a chance, I encourage you to really read Trey's blog from last week. And this is really about how we're making decisions in this time of crisis. And we've laid out the 6 principles that we think about and try to live into, try to design to, that we understand are part of all living systems, and in trying to design and manage organizations as a living social system, then we are thinking a lot about how do we respond to a crisis like this in a conventional way versus a regenerative way. And we just wanted to spend this time really exploring that with you all, and what ways have you maybe responded yourselves, either in a conventional way or in a regenerative way? What inspirations have you seen? What learnings? And really just a chance to share with each other. So we'll go through this semi-structured, but really, as we said, this is open space. As anything comes up, please share. So starting at the top, we see one of the inherent principles of living systems is, of course, that they are not siloed. They're not separated into different sections, but they work as a whole. They work as a totality. If you, those of you who are on the webinar a little bit ago, one of the defining aspects of a living system is that life itself is in fact a property that's dependent on all the interconnections of an organism, all the interconnections of a living being. There's no way to say life exists here in a body but doesn't exist here. It exists everywhere. And so it's really about all the interconnected and interdependent parts of a system. And so if we think of an organization that way, or not just the organization, but think of the organization and its community, its clients, its partners, its supply chain, its society that it's part of, how do we respond to a crisis with that principle in mind?
So one thing that comes to mind for me, this is Patty Denise, is I've seen many, and this I think is maybe like a coping mechanism, right? When as people move through something that's so massive and so unprecedented and unforeseen, there's an element of like only going with what we know, which is not considering necessarily the holistic elements of people as whole people moving through this. And so in a sense, I've seen some respond with only considering like the output level of that employee and how do we maintain just that level. And I think if we only consider that, we actually lose the assets that we do have on our team, because when we can think more holistically about what everyone is experiencing, then it's an interconnected network, right? Of like, and I can't think of an explicit example, but I think when we see each other as whole, then we can see how those experiences that everyone is going through impacts other people, right? And then we adjust maybe the expectation or the plan compared to if we were just looking at that output level. And I think that really supports us towards a level of sustainability of not how are we going to drive through operations just for the next month, but like in a year from now, right? I think how we respond now in one of those paradigms or another will have a very different outlook than a year from now, depending on which lens we take. So I think the holistic lens lends itself to a longer, a better outlook down the line if we can think more holistically about what people might need now.
Thank you so
I
much.
thought of an example as you were talking. For me, it was seeing doctors having to present themselves far more as whole people than they usually do. And to hear their stories about they are and how unsupported they're feeling or being, that could open a whole other perspective of medical practice, because doctors also have a tendency to disrespect patients and what patients know. And maybe this will kind of help us all understand each other better.
I would like to add to that. I think doctors have been viewed as the experts, and now because of the isolation, all healthcare providers actually, nurses and everyone, they have to be the emotional comfort and that just many different facets than just to come in as the health expert and lead, which I think is good, but also very taxing and tiring and exhausting when they're doing it at this kind of level and this kind of repercussions. But to get the emotional side involved, the human side involved in these healthcare professionals is good. And I know that there's lots of healthcare professionals that do that on a regular basis, but maybe for those who haven't in the past, it may be a different experience. But
Thanks, Jen. Anyone else? Reflections on holistic as a principle and what a holistic response is, looks like, feels like?
Yes, I could go, and I think it's an example that's very much in line with what has been put forward by both Patty and Adam, and of course Jen. And there's a friend of mine in South Africa who is a coach who does, leadership development, coaching for small entrepreneurs. And she does it pro bono. So considering now that she's working from home, what she's decided to do is to offer coaching as a form of emotional support to the different kinds of healthcare workers, from nurses all the way to doctors. And she's just doing it all online, and she's doing it, through WhatsApp, sometimes through Zoom, and just, seeing how citizens can step out, of being citizens, but really now moving in to offer support to people who need it at this particular time. And I think it really feeds into that idea of holism, because now you're beginning to see the relationship between myself as a citizen and the doctor or the nurse, beyond that typical relationship of doctor-patient. But it's like there's a whole other dynamic that's now emerging, that, as was said, that the doctor is a whole person, and they could be having all kinds of stress and anxiety, and, mental health could be decreasing. So I think that's also just an illuminating example of how what has been shared is kind of being done not too far from where I am.
Thank you, Robert. I'm sorry, I'm smirking because of not too far. By African standards, South Africa and Kenya are not too far. It's an 8-hour flight. I know because I've taken it.
Indeed.
Great, thank you. Other reflections on holistic? Great, let's move.
I would say that it's a very difficult concept for people in our mainstream culture to grasp. And I'm not sure how to make it easier. I mean, I know Alan has struggled with it for 60 years and still struggling.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. We discussed this morning. I think to me, it's really an experience, which is why it's hard. It's not really. It's a viewpoint. It's a perception. It can't really be understood intellectually, and we of course can. Many different spiritual traditions all throughout history and around the world have touched on this, that we walk through the world perceiving as an individual, we don't really see phenomenon as truly interdependent, as everything that's happening is truly some combination of me and my contribution and someone else's contribution. And so we at In Rhythm, we recognize this. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is provide tools to, in a sense, kind of urge more holistic thinking, or more try to see the interdependencies of different decision making. And so, yeah. Great, thank you. So, the second principle is the idea that we, in a complex system and living systems, that and particularly social systems, to be regenerative, though we're not just connected, but that we're actually mutualistically interacting. That when we can design our relationships, when we are designing our systems, then traditional businesses, of course, have a lot of values about top down, about winner loser, and this principle is really saying, actually, if we are thinking of the whole is in fact more resilient, more abundant, more flexible when those connections are mutualistic, when they are in fact have both sides of that relationship in mind. So a conventional reaction, of course, to a crisis is to protect and control, just to think of the individual, not perceive the other. And so thinking about mutualisms, how anyone seen examples of or have thoughts on how we would ensure or think about truly mutualistic relationships with our customers, with our partners, if we are part of a supply chain, what kind of decision making could we make in that, and yeah, open it up again to just thoughts on how we have a mutualistic response at a time of crisis.
I heard a story about, and there's a lot of these stories floating around of, companies having to, they're drastically being impacted economically, right? And so especially even large companies at that. And so some have responded with, laying off entire staff, and others have responded by, and I'm thinking of specifically with super large corporations, but others have responded by, reducing the pay of the top executives that can make up to 10 or 20 times more than staff, so that they can, maintain some level of salary for staff. So I feel like that's a little bit more mutualistic than, large companies maybe not taking that approach. And that's just one example I can think of that I saw in the media recently.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, KLM actually public. It's so even a very
Yes.
large company, very large airline, took that response.
Yeah.
Great. Other thoughts, other examples people have seen, or ideas you may have for?
I was also thinking, okay, I'll continue to add. I was also thinking about how, it's such a tough balance in this time to figure out what a mutualistic offering is for many companies, right? Something here at Rhythm that we've been considering is, okay, we had all these online courses planned, are they even relevant anymore? Is that something that would be mutualistic to, our customers and our network connections? And, how is it relevant anymore? And so I think so many people and so many companies are facing this question. Maybe that more speaks to evolutionary, actually. How can we evolve in light of this crisis?
Other thoughts? Reflections?
It's currently, to my understanding, that Zoom has kind of made its service free for schools and universities to use, and I'm not sure exactly which category exactly how they're doing it, but that's one thing that I've seen and heard, that Zoom has done that to enable learning from home to happen. So I'm imagining it's to really support the growing number of people who are now coming to do their stuff online. And I'm just trying to see if that maybe falls within mutualistic or maybe another principle.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, certainly a generous offer. Great. One thing that comes to my mind, it's interesting, I know that Denmark's response for payroll protection was specifically a agreement between the government, the large unions, and individual businesses. And each business, particularly large businesses, came up with a individual agreement about what was possible. What could the business afford? What could government provide? and what could the union do? And so a different posture. The outcome may be the same, but if you look at the US's approach, it's very much this large government pot that's then divvied up, and it's in the form of loans. And so it's to me, at least the intention of that system was, wow, let's have a conversation. Let's think about what's possible. And it's not the same for every business, which I think is a big part of mutualism. It's a big way we bring an equity lens into this, is that, right, everyone receiving the same check, the same pot, is not the same as everybody actually having a conversation about what their needs are. So
can I ask a question there, Jeff?
of course.
I think the thing you've just talked about dialogue and conversation is important even for discussing this principle of mutualistic, because I was gonna share about how the government of Kenya has temporarily, for the next 3 or 4 months, reduced the tax burden for Kenyan taxpayers, for reducing the pay as you earn tax rate, and as well as the VAT and all kinds of other taxes. But then I was just thinking, maybe if that was a decision that was made within an office, like amongst maybe dialogue between cabinet ministers and all of that, vis-a-vis it being a decision that was made in consultation with maybe people from unions and all kinds of other stakeholders, then I think it would become a mutualistic response, because you can get exactly the perspective of the other person, so that their insight can actually inform the decisions made. So I think probably that's one of the things that determines whether or not like a given response is mutualistic dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. Other people have reactions to those comments? Great, Robert. I think you naturally are pointing to the next principle, which is this idea of uniqueness, right? That there is not one structure, one system, one solution that fits all. And particularly in this time of crisis, particularly in response to crisis, how do we lean into the different needs and the different responses, the different context of each situation, each of our organizations are in and hold, and each of the systems we're part of or dependent on, or so the idea of uniqueness is definitely connected to dialogue, I think, Robert, and that we are, without dialogue, we can't know the uniqueness. We just have to assume everyone's situation is the same.
Hi, this may be under mutualism, but it's a shame to see that at least for the different states here in the US, it just seems more as a competition for resources and equipment than for these states sending to the hot spots, like Washington, take these, take all the equipment you need. New York, you take this batch, and it just seems like it's very competitive now. And I've heard that governors are online bidding against each other, and upping up the pricing of different equipment, which is, it's just ridiculous. It should be shared, and people who need it the most. And, you know, I don't have, you know, the complete visibility of how things are, but yeah. Yeah, I think we'll be hearing about this years from now. And I think that's just one of the ways that I think that this could have been handled better.
Yeah, Jen, I agree with that. I see there's like a similarity in the command and control approach versus the example I'm thinking of. I think intersects uniqueness, evolutionary, nodal. I mean, these are all intersecting, right? But thinking a lot about organizational response and in uniqueness, what comes up for me is just the tremendous skills and expertise people have at different levels and through different lenses. And nodal reminds me of the ability to move on that expertise without feeling limited by a command and control approach, right? And so some of the organizations that I work with have varying degrees of, what's the word? Yeah, interdisciplinary approach, or no, that's not the word. Basically horizontal or, you know, vertical. And in moments like this, you can move much faster when you kind of release some of that control, right? It's like there's
decisions being made.
Yeah, when you can think of when there's will, ability, and knowledge, capacity to do something and move on it. I think that's what uniqueness calls to me. Everyone's going to have a different thing to contribute, and allowing yourself to be nodal in that decision making, and that allows us to be evolutionary in the moment, right? Because we need to be able to not respond as if it was 3 weeks ago, respond as if it's today. And I will just share that I sense a lot of resistance around that. Like, it's like this loss of control, or like, you know, I think if we share in the responsibility, then we don't have to feel so concerned about, you know, what if that outcome is really going to stop with the one leader or the one leadership team, really bringing everyone into owning and executing on that plan together and being responsible for tending to the health of our system together.
Yeah, absolutely, Patty. I think one of the things that shows up, which to your Jeff's point of uniqueness, calling that out, is when we don't value the uniqueness or the contribution of everybody coming to the table that is super meaningful, we tend to design in a way to be able to protect and control, like you're saying. And and not knowing what that is makes it worse, because then you don't assume that somebody else has that have something meaningful to bring into either that conversation or that design or that situation. You actually assume it's either just it's a general participation, and unfortunately I feel like a lot of the response today is, and you hear that between those in control, that you know, all governors are the same, or all government officials are the same, or versus the ability to see how something unique could come out of that. And I, you know, to Jeff's point of what was happening overseas, even if the outcome ended up being very similar, everyone was valued for the role that they were playing within society, in that unique, from the unions to the government to the corporations to the NGOs to all of those. And to me, there's some real incredible goodwill that gets created when that's the case.
Yeah, and thank you, Patty. Go ahead, Adam.
Were you going, Patty?
No, go ahead, Adam. I was just going to say
I,
let's all follow Patty's wonderful example.
oh, okay.
These clearly all do relate to one another, and if the structure of one by one is not working for people, it is great to treat them the same. So just wanted to open it up to any comments or thoughts. So.
I just, what struck me about what you were just saying, Trey, was the phrase, those in control, because I don't think anybody is in control right now. And I, I think that's in some ways a really good thing, because it's, in a sense, it's forced relocalization to the nth degree. You've relocalized to your own apartment or house. And then we have an opportunity to see what we have right outside our door and how we can begin on things that are within our geographical reach. Like, we still have farmers market with distancing conventions, but we still have farmers markets and local people making food and delivering it one way or another, and supporting local business, even though Amazon looms heavily. We're inventing the models that we've been needing to invent for a long time, or rediscovering them. So I think this whole thing is so full of paradoxes, because for the past 7 years, we've been doing in-person live conferences, and we get people who can travel from other parts of the world and people who are local, and know that now that nobody can travel, people who are fortunate enough to have good internet connections can come from everywhere. And it's, for us, for biodiversity, for a livable climate, it's completely reevaluating our ways of communicating with, in these very serious, and people forget about climate at the moment. I mean, I don't, and I'm sure you folks don't, but I haven't seen much on climate at all in the news. But we have a chance to reset to a whole other set of possibilities for relationships. And I wanted to say one other thing, and that is that coronavirus and climate emerged from the same root cause. And I think that's an important connection to make, because we're not going to solve either of those. I mean, the COVID epidemic may taper off, but then there'll be another one and another one. We're not going to solve either of those without addressing the root cause, which of course is the destruction of the biosphere, the massive, massive destruction of the biosphere. I don't even know how we made it this long, but just a thought.
Thanks. And this is Christine, I just want to give you a chance, not to put you on the spot, but I know this is a funny medium sometimes to jump in, so just want to leave space for your thoughts or reflections if you wish, but don't feel any pressure.
Okay, thanks. So I guess for me, this is thinking of like the principle of holistic, mutualistic uniqueness, and like what I'm finding is, like, in the absence of one, how it's hard to do the other. So for example, if we're not valuing the uniqueness, how can we even get to mutualistic, right? Because without that value, then there is no kind of there's no way to kind of come to a mutualistic place. And then also you lose sight of the holistic aspect of the interconnectedness. And so for me, as I'm reading things and hearing people's responses, I'm also seeing like, okay, well, you really need to have this in order to make sure that these other principles are able to live as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reflection. It's absolutely true. You know, these principles, again, these are informed by living systems, which just is. Living systems have evolved from billions of years. And so thank you for that reflection. Sometimes we do get into discussions sometimes with others in the space, you know, who may have said 8 principles, or someone else who said 4, and well, which one is it? And I'm always not very interested in those conversations. To me, there's a whole, and you can look at it with 8 windows or 4 windows or 2 windows. It's the same whole inside those windows. So thank you for that, Christine. Really just, again, we're just here to hold space and open it up. So any thoughts, people, just in general, or on anything, whether it's what's on the screen or just where you're at and what's going on and your experience, and what can we share with each other around the world?
I'd like to hear from our 2 New Yorkers who are in the so-called epicenter and what it's been like.
It's wild. I was looking for the mute button. I think there's an interconnectedness with what's going on here and what potentially might go on in other places too, right? And so this is just showing the mutualism of this experience globally. And in my lifetime, I have yet to experience something so indiscriminately unifying across the globe, right? For me to feel so connected to people I've never met, who I'll never meet, and we're going through a similar experience. So for as much as I feel in the heart of this epicenter, and my family who doesn't live here, they're in the Bay Area in California, all of my people are really concerned about us here in the epicenter. I also feel really connected, and like, what lessons can we learn from people who are in kind of more advanced stages of this outbreak? Yeah, because this is a marathon. So I had a friend who was describing, I think it's worth sharing. He said one of his mentors one time was encouraging him to do something bold in his career, and was saying, you know, a lot of times people think life is short, so it makes us feel a scarcity around what we choose to do. And he was instead posing the lens of life is long, so why not go out and try to do something, because you know you have time after to try something different, right? And so in a similar way, it's kind of a weird analogy, but I feel that this is a marathon. So instead of feeling so precious and like white knuckling this moment and what we need to do, it's like easing into a different rhythm of trying to be in tune with what we're discerning, right? What we're seeing, what we're feeling, and knowing that the only task at hand is to just try to respond in a way that feels in right relationship to this thing, knowing that it's going to be a minute. We're going to be in this circumstance for a while, right? So that brought me some relief too, because there is this truly felt sense of urgency and fear, and I understand that. And I also feel like I like the play on this idea of rhythm. Like, how can we match our rhythm now to this new context that we're in?
Thank you, Patty. I just want to welcome, is it Murray? Welcome, Murray. sorry about your connection challenges, but you have a few minutes left if you want to introduce yourself and where you're calling from. And at this point, we're sort of reflecting on our collective situation and how to best respond in a regenerative way.
Kia ora everyone. I was hoping just to quietly sneak in, and maybe I shouldn't have turned my video on. I really just wanted to sit in and listen. I'd just come off the back of the webinar from, well, in New Zealand it's Friday morning, so from this morning's webinar. And then, Jeff, I read your piece on grief. And I thought, actually, I want to kind of just jump back into that little regenerative space again, and just didn't want to leave that bubble too quickly, really. So I was hoping just to dip a toe in while this conversation was still going on, and wanted to get a bit of a handle around what this forum is about and what it's trying to serve, really. So unfortunately, I don't have anything more to contribute apart from that. But thank you for the welcome and the chance to just say kia ora to everyone.
Are you in Australia?
Oh no, sorry. I always assume I'm I'm from New Zealand.
Oh, that's why you have a southern accent.
I could have said the same about you, my friend, but yes, totally.
Yes. Hey, Adam, you've touched on a slightly. I lived in Melbourne for 6 years, so I know a little. You've touched on a cultural nuance there. Just don't mention an underhand bowl in the next, and you're fine.
Okay, I won't do it again.
Welcome, Murray, and yeah, just we're actually holding these. We'll be holding these next week as well, and thank you for reading the piece, and we'll have a chance to reflect on that as well. But these are really these spaces are really just our commitment to and our offering to our community, and so they're really open. They're just we understand how important being witnessed is, to speak, to be in community as best we can in these digital forums. We have this, so please join us next week as well. We'd love to have you, all of you, and please join, and thank you for your contributions. And we'll respect time now, but if anyone has any closing thoughts or ideas.
I do have a quick question. Can we find the principles on your website?
Yes, so this blog that the screen that I'm sharing now is on the website. So
Okay.
it's nrhythm.co. This is the decision making in crisis. And then what Murray was referring to is we just published a new blog this morning about working with grief specifically, and how grief is a process, an integral process, inherent process of regeneration. So.
Oh, thank you very much, Jeff, and great to meet you all. Hope to see you again soon.
Great.
I have another webinar to go to. It's just like, oh my gosh, I thought this was going to be a vacation. I guess not, but thank you.
Bye, Adam. Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Stay
Dropping off.
safe, stay
It's-
healthy. Thank you for all the work you all do. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Thank
good to be
you so much.
connected.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Robert. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
So sad to see everyone go.
I know, but it's exciting.
It was so good. So good. I just think these are so meaningful, and I think people
Yeah.
get a lot out of it.
I think so too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get a lot out of it for sure.
Definitely. Me as well. Yeah.
All right.
Be well.
You too. All right, we'll
Good
talk
night.
tomorrow. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.